I want to thank you for coming today. My name is Herbert Cole, and I'm the emergency manager for the city of Livermore. And this is the second in a series of 4 that we're doing here at the library. And this one is going to be emergency planning for the business community. We're going to talk about creating a seamless business continuity process, which will incorporate several different plans. They're typically done individually, but we're going to try and bring them all together as one and talk about how they will be executed in succession. So, before we begin, are there any questions? Or all right.
Well, I missed the first presentation. Is that available on the PowerPoint?
The actual first presentation on emergency preparedness is available. It's on the, you can find it on the library website. You can also find it on the City of Livermore website. If you go to the About Us, and at the very bottom there's an emergency preparedness link, and you can find it there also.
Thank you.
So today, like I said, we're going to talk about this seamless process of putting plans together for the business community and basically for your business. And emergency management for a business is not much different than it is for a city or a school district or a parks district. The goal is basically to create what I call a swivel chair environment. You have your day-to-day operations where you have resources that are readily available and there aren't any impacts. So if you need to do something, you can call up a resource that's available, you can do what you need to do. But in a disaster scenario or an emergency scenario, you need to kind of swivel chair. And you need to kind of say, okay, this is how I work on a day-to-day basis. Now I'm going to turn my chair and this is how I'm going to work in this emergency environment. And the reason I'm able to swivel chair is because I already have everything in place. I've planned, I've trained, I've got my resources already laid out, so I know what I'm going to do. So it's just a matter of turning my chair. And in a disaster, I'm going to have some resource constraints. So I'm going to have to plan for that. I'm going to have life safety concerns. That's going to be my number one foremost concern at the beginning of the event. And then I need to figure out continuity of operations. You know, while this event is going on, it is going to cause some impacts. Are those impacts going to allow me to continue my operations into the near future or even longer? So that's really the kind of environment that we're going to be working in. So the emergency management cycle is what we work in. It's a cycle of mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Mitigation is basically efforts that reduce the effects or the impacts of the event itself. So if we had an earthquake, what are some mitigation efforts we might take for an earthquake? How would we lessen the impact of an earthquake before it ever happens?
Being prepared, having supplies.
Okay, having some supplies, oh, that's preparation, okay.
Having a plan of how to exit the house and where to go.
Okay, that kind of goes back into preparedness and preparation. We're trying to lessen the impact of the event.
Bolting your bookcases.
Bolting bookcases, so that's a mitigation effort.
So are you saying, so instead of like, okay, you know you're not going to be able to call for help, so what do?
How would you, what might you do? So if your communication system is going to be impacted, what are some things that you could do now to lessen the impact of your communications going down?
I might want to contact Kaiser, which is my healthcare provider, and find out what their plan is in such a case.
That's a good point. There you go, right there. So now you're starting to look at how am I going to lessen the impact of this event to me. I'm going to go get information. And I'm going to take that information, and then I can use that information. So like, Kaiser, what is your plan? Kaiser gives you that information. I can take that information and begin to create my plan to respond. So one of the things between mitigation and preparedness a lot of people kind of struggle with is we prepare to respond. So if you want to know what preparedness is, just think I'm preparing to respond. I'm mitigating to either eliminate or prevent damage or to lessen that damage or impact. So bolting your house down is a mitigation effort. Storing food and water is a preparedness effort because when the earthquake hits and I respond, I want food and water. Once I've done the mitigation effort, I'm done. So I bolted the house down. I don't need to do anything after that. there's not anything that's going to happen after that I'm worried about.
Well, one of the things I would worry about is that I have a 2-story townhouse. Where would it best be, where's my best place to store all of these materials? Would it be downstairs, would it be upstairs?
I would suggest that you would store
Or in
them,
the attic?
I would say you store them downstairs in a roll-away garbage can that's readily available, that you can roll it off of the property if you had to. And that goes for, as we begin to look at business preparedness, same thing. If you have a business and you want to prepare it, start thinking about those things. Where will I be able to get my supplies from? Where will my employees be able to get those supplies from? So mitigation is to reduce those efforts. Preparedness are the actions, as you were saying before. We're going to go ahead and store water. We're going to store food. What are the plans that we have in place, or what plans are we creating? And we're going to talk about those today, the continuity planning and things like that. Response is exactly what it says. When the event happens, we respond. So if I'm at home, I'm going to go through what my home plan is. You know, I'm going to check my house, I'm going to check my family, I'm going to check my neighbors, and then I'm going to get out and go through whatever my plan is. In your business, it's the exact same thing. And there's some certain plans that we do need to talk about that are required by law. And then finally, recovery. What's it going to take to get us back to that pre-emergency posture? How do we get back to the way we were before this entire event happened? So that's the emergency management cycle, and that's what we work in, and all of that is built around continuity. How do we keep going? Because, you know, business is our livelihood. We need to keep going. So the first step in the planning process is going to be risk management planning. We need to identify the risks and hazards that your business faces. Now, you can replace business with home or, you know, your personal experience. But what we really want to do is kind of focus on business today. But like I said, this is transmutable to your own personal life. So what is it that can cause an impact? How serious would that impact be? What is the likelihood of this event occurring? And can the risk be reduced or eliminated? So what you want to do is you want to sit down, get a piece of paper, and start writing down what is it that can happen here where we live. So let's name some risks or hazards in this area. And let's pretend that we own ABC Widget Company. Okay? What are some of the risks that we face?
Several. Starting off with 2, we have the Greenville Fault intersecting with another fault.
Okay.
And we are behind what's expected for quakes at this time. That's number 1. Number 2 is our primary industry. Well, we're in the Bay Area, which is part of California, and what is it, the 5th largest economy of the world. If someone wanted to impact the United States, this would be the area in which to do it. Finally, we have our primary employers here, which are Livermore,
The lab.
Lawrence Livermore Laboratories and Sandia Laboratories, and those are terrorist targets, not to mention maybe from elsewhere. So those are some of it. Recently, we've been having more fires up in the Altamont Pass. Some of them came pretty close just recently. So those are a few things.
So those are risks that we have and hazards that we have in this area. Those all tend to be, well, we have the terrorism, so that's not a natural, that's a human-caused one. So let's take each one of those. So if we had an earthquake, how serious would the impact be to our business? Right here on the Greenville, let's say it's a 7.0.
Probably bring our businesses to a halt.
Okay, it would bring our business to a halt. We're going, okay, it's probably going to have an impact. What if we had a wildfire in the Altamont? Would that bring our business to a halt?
No.
It might. I know that recently, nextdoor.com, I think there were some notifications about this most recent kind of scary fire. And last fall, there was another one between Livermore and Pleasanton. Not so important, but close. But Nextdoor came out with something. I guess there's emergency preparedness, thinking about what could happen. And what was your question?
So the question was, would there be a serious impact? There might be some minor impacts. There might be some delays. Delivering.
Yeah, if it's up around the,
So maybe some temporary impacts.
if it's up around the Altamont, that's already a traffic jam area, so if you were trying to deal with emergency vehicles, that would be an issue.
Or getting goods and services in and out. All right.
Right.
What's the likelihood of an earthquake occurring?
We're overdue.
Okay. What
The
about
last-
fire?
The last big quake was in 1980, it was a 5.8, it caused a couple million of
It
damage.
caused
I
damage.
forget if there was one death or what. The lab was impacted, which is scary. So that was then, and they're figuring there's something
So that'll happen. What
that
about
could
fire?
happen sooner.
Fire likely occurring? Okay.
More likely than likely.
Terrorist attack? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not so high up. I mean, the lab is a target, but they're pretty well fortified.
Not
And
really-
is it going to have a
not
huge
for
impact?
Not for a missile or anything.
That's true. But for the most part, is that going to have an impact on our ABC widget company? Probably
Well,
not.
on terminal.
It could. And can we reduce the risk or can we eliminate it? Earthquake, we can't eliminate that, right? But we could reduce it. We can reduce the impacts. We can plan for it. Same with terrorism, same with fire. So all of these things, when we start to do our risk management planning, we're going to go ahead and start looking at those issues. So what we do is we want to go ahead and identify our risk, and then we're going to identify the likelihood that it occurs, and we'll rank them from very high, high, medium, and low. What would the impact be? What is the priority? So is this something I need to address now? Or is it something that it's not really high on my list of things to deal with? So as ABC Widget Company, we make widgets. We don't have any national defense or any, we make widgets for just people that go to the hardware store. So it's probably not a priority if it doesn't have a huge impact on national security. But it may have a high impact or a high priority if it's the only thing that we do, and that's how we make most of our money. So we have to kind of look at that.
May I add something?
Uh-huh.
A lot of the light industry around here supports Livermore Lab. If that were a target or if there were a terrorist event there, it would definitely impact any ABC widget that supplied them.
And that's exactly what we would want to identify them. So the risk distributor would be terrorism. The likelihood might be medium, and then the impact would probably be high to very high because we're all supplying, right? We supply our widgets to them. So that particular event might have an impact. And then we want to identify any preventative actions that we can go ahead and take, and then contingency plans. So, what would we do in the event that we aren't able to deliver and sell to our biggest customer, the labs? Have we opened up secondary markets, things like that? So we want to begin to identify those things. So we kind of talked about some of these, some of the risks and hazards that we have that threaten our ABC Widget Company, our natural hazards, human influence, which is terrorism, technological hazards, power outages. Our business requires power, right? It requires water. So if there's a power outage, if there's a water disruption, things of that nature, it could have an impact on our business.
Hacking. Hacking.
Yes, hacking. So if somebody gets into our computer system, they destroy our payroll, or there's a lot of things they can do. Supply chain disruption. We were talking about the fire on the Altamont. Maybe we're not able to get the inputs, the things that we use to build our widgets, because they come from Modesto and Tracy and everywhere else. And because of the event, the fire, they've got to go all the way around. So there's a delay. There may be a temporary delay. If it's an earthquake, we may not be able to get anything in here. We may be ready and open for business, but because of damage somewhere else, we can't do it. Transportation disruption we talked about, and then human resource constraints. So maybe people aren't able to get to work, and all of a sudden we don't have enough people to produce our widgets. Now, one of the things,
The other thing is, if there is really a disaster, the humans are going to try and exit, or they're dealing with whatever they're dealing with, and it's not going to be with the business,
That's
because
right.
that's not priority one.
That's right. So what do we do as a business owner to figure out what we're going to do without without that personnel? Supply chain disruption, another thing to think about is it doesn't always have to be directly related to us. Let's say that all of our inputs to build our widgets are manufactured in some place like Japan or China or Malaysia, and they have a natural disaster there. Now all of a sudden, I can't get the parts and the materials that I need to create my widgets. So have I got other sources that I can receive this material from? So that's another thing we need to plan for. Insurance. So insurance is a mitigation measure. We talked about that, right? Mitigation, how do we lessen the impact of things? Purchasing insurance is one of those. So I can buy insurance for fire. So if we have a fire at our business, we're going to get reimbursed for it. If I don't have fire insurance and we burn, guess what? It comes out of our pocket. Do we have the cash flow? Do we have the reserves to go ahead and rebuild? So that's a mitigation effort to lessen the impact of a hazard or risk. Data backup and security. So you had indicated hacking. That was one of the ones you indicated. Do we have a plan for that? You know, do we back up daily? Do we back up nightly, weekly? What is our plan? We need to identify that. Identify what data we're going to back up, how often we back it up, where do we store that? Do we store it on site? Do we basically spread it out and store it in several different locations? We need to identify that and create a plan for that and have that backup process established. And then once we've got that process established for backing it up, how do we resurrect that? So now all of a sudden, we've had the event, I've got all this data that I have to get to, and I have to reconstitute my business. So what is the process for getting that data back up and running? Do I call the server farm and say, this is ABC Widget Company, we lost everything in a fire, we need you to go ahead, we're going to bring up a new computer system, new servers, we need you to go ahead and begin feeding that back to us so that we can rebuild. So those are the types of things that we need to start thinking about also. So this is all under that risk management heading. The second step we're going to talk about...
I'm sorry, I got distracted.
That's okay.
So with backup, does insurance cover that?
It would depend on the company, it would depend on the policy, and I don't have an answer for that.
Thank you.
Step 2 is the business impact analysis. This is the one piece that everyone that, when you're getting into creating a business and starting a business, you're going, oh, I think about these things, but I never put them down on paper. But one of the things you want to do is we start to look at this event that we're going to suffer here in a little bit, is we want to identify what our critical business activities are. What is it we're in business for? Okay, what is it that we do? And if we didn't do it, what impact would it have on our business? And how long could my business survive? How long will we as ABC Widget Company survive if we're not able to engage in these particular activities? So we want to nail those down. We want to know what is our critical business activity, what are the impacts of the business if we're not able to do that, and how long can we survive? How quickly do we need to get back to doing this before we're out of business? So when we create a business impact analysis, we want to identify, once again, what that activity is, give a description of it, and once again, priority. Is this a high priority? Is this a low priority? We want to give it a priority. And the reason is because this is where we're going to start building our planning around, saying, okay, anything that's a high priority, I need to address that now. I know that if this happens, it's going to take me at least 2 weeks, to get back up and running. But in that 2-week period, I better be back up and running, because at that 2-week recovery time objective, that's the critical period that I have to work within. If I'm not up in 2 weeks, I'm out of business. So we want to identify how long can I be out? What is my recovery time objective? I have to know those things. Any questions? And the reason we want to know those things is because when the event occurs, it's too late to start thinking about, okay, what do I have to do right now? What do I need to produce widgets right now, or do I need to get widgets out the door right now? What is the main thing I need to do? So when that event occurs, you're going to move into what's step 3. Actually, step 3 is the first thing you're probably going to create, but it's the emergency action plan. And the emergency action plan is required by OSHA. If you have less than 10 employees, it can be verbal, but if you have more than 10 employees, it needs to be written. And the whole purpose of the EAP is get out of the building, get out of your facility, take roll, and figure out what goes next. And that's where your business continuity planning, the piece that we did before with that impact analysis and trying to identify what are the things I have to get done, that's what's going to flow out of this. So when I sit down to do my emergency action plan, I'm going to look at all those risks in that risk management table that we created. What are my high priorities? What are my low priorities? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to address each one of those. So if it's fire, what is the means of reporting a fire and another emergency in our business? So how do we do that? What is our process? We need to write that down. What are the evacuation procedures and emergency escape routes? So if it's an earthquake, what do we tell people to do immediately? Duck and cover. Duck, cover, hold on. That's the first thing you're going to do. The next thing you're going to do in our evacuation procedure is check. Is it safe to get up and leave? Are you okay? Are your neighbors okay? Can I get out of the building right now? Yes, boom. So I evacuate, I follow the procedures laid out in writing, I follow the escape route, and I get out of the building. Anybody that needs to remain behind, because we produce widgets, right? So we have equipment and everything. That equipment is expensive. If we need people to stay behind and begin shutting those things down because maybe we use chrome plating or something. Hazardous materials, those things need to be shut down in order. So we have people stay behind. They've already been identified in writing what their duties are. It's all written down. They stay behind. They follow that plan. And then as everybody begins to evacuate and meets out at our area, out in the parking lot or wherever we say we're going to meet, we take roll. Because we want to know where everyone is. Was Bob here today? Was Sally here today? No, they're on vacation. Okay, so we're not worried about them being trapped inside. Any rescue or medical duties for employees, so if we have floor wardens, people that will clear the building and make sure that everyone is out, if they have additional duties, like maybe doing first aid or things like that, we want to identify who those people are. And then the names and job titles of persons that need to be contacted. So let's say that we produce widgets 24 hours a day. Who are the supervisors that need to be contacted after hours to say, okay, we had a big earthquake here, we've evacuated the building, and we're putting into motion our emergency action plan, and then we'll be moving into business continuity. So we need to know who those people are and how to contact them. So we've kind of stepped through, identified what our risks are, we've given them a ranking, we've kind of done the business impact analysis and said, okay, if these events occurred, this is what would happen to our business, so we need to kind of address these particular issues, the impacts. We know that when the event occurs, we have a plan that's written out on how to get out of the building. Now we're out of the building and it's time to go ahead and begin that process of recovery. How do we get our business back up and running and going again so that we're back to where we were before the event occurred? So we want to go ahead and develop strategies and write them down on what activities we need to do immediately. And I'm talking as soon as practicable. What activities do we need to begin engaging in? And how quickly can we do that? So let's say that we had chrome plating, we shut it all down. We know that's one of the first things that's going to need to come back up. So we basically plan around that. We say step 1 in recovery is we need, now that we know the building is safe and everyone's safe, we need to bring that chrome plating operation back up. So what are the processes for doing that? What are the processes for bringing IT back up? Bringing our communications back up? We want to identify all of that. What are the resources required? Are there only certain people that can do these things? We want to identify those people, how to contact them. Do we have specific vendors that we need to engage with? So we want to go ahead and identify those. We want to put them into the plan in writing with contact information. We want to document our RTOs, remember our return time objectives? So we want to document those, and we want to basically say, okay, it's going to take us 48 hours to bring up our chrome plating operation from scratch. But if it's been down for more than 72 hours, you know, we're out of business at that point, and now we're kind of bumping up against that 72-hour time frame, the 48 hours. We've been down for 24. If we go, we're going to be in trouble. So we need to start thinking about how do we address those. We need, okay, our RTO is 48 hours, 72 hours, 2 weeks. How do we get to that one right away? We want to list the persons that have a responsibility for each task and the expected completion date. So who's doing our chrome plating? What's their name? When can they have it done by? So if you look at this, this is a process of basically working a timeline backwards. So we have our event, and while our event is going on and it's progressing, we're looking at our business working backwards to get back to that 0 hour. So we're saying, 2 weeks ago, or 2 weeks from now, I'm out of business. What can I do working backwards to get to that 0 hour? Does that make sense? So, and I apologize for the quality of the slide, but it is in your slides. If you use a magnifying glass, you might be able to see. So in our recovery plan, once again, we're going to identify those critical business activities and what has happened to them. So in this particular case, it says production services have been halted. So our critical business activity is production services. It has been halted. Our recovery time objective is 2 weeks. So that means we've got 2 weeks to kind of get this back into play. But as time has gone on, let's say we're now at day 13. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, I'm at the 2 week limit and I got to get this done. I got to get production back up within 2 weeks or we're gone. I'm at day 13 in a 2 week schedule. What are the things I need to do? Do I look back at all of the other objectives I have going on and say, okay, I've got to reorder these things? So that's why you have to write these things down, because this plan is a living, breathing document. It's going to help you say, okay, this is a priority, this is a priority. Some things are have more priority than others. So this is your disaster recovery plan. With that recovery plan is the associated recovery checklist. So when that crisis or event or disaster is over, you're basically going to have a checklist, because you're not going to be thinking straight. You've got this huge ABC widget company to run, right? So what is it I need to do? Should I do this first? Should I do that first? We're going to use a checklist. We were talking about flying, right? What was the one thing pilots live by? Checklists. So now that the crisis is over, have I refocused efforts towards recovery? Yes, check. Have I deactivated any staff members and resources that are no longer necessary? Yes, check. Have I continued to gather information about the situation as it impacts us? So as we start to see out in the community, the roads begin to open up, and we know that Altamont is now open, so we can get our inputs from Modesto and from Tracy. I want to check that off and say, yep, I know that. I can even make notes off to the side, say, okay, I know that Tracy is going to be delivering. Have I checked our cash requirements or any monetary, instruments that I need to get back into shape? Contacted the insurance company. Did I do that? Yes, I did. Develop any financial goals or timeframes for the recovery. We've done that in the plan, right? We know what our RTO is. So you're going to use this checklist and just kind of work through it, and you can take this checklist and make it yours. Make it what you want. Recovery contacts. Just like the checklist, I don't know everything I need to know because I'm going to be stressed. It's the same with my contacts. I want to have all my contacts in one location. Who is our telephone provider? Who's our internet service provider? Who's our bank or banks? Who is our main supplier, our backup supplier, our accountant, our lawyer? All of these people that are going to be part of our business on a day-to-day operational basis, I want to have their names and their numbers and the ability to contact them in a disaster or following a disaster. Having a Rolodex is great when it's on my desk, but if I have it in my disaster plan and my continuity plan, it's even better, because that's the one document I'm going to pull, and I'm going to live by that document through this whole event. So everything I need is in this little package. I don't have to go to my desk to find this, or on my computer when the power's out and I can't get to my contact list in Outlook or whatever. So I want it all on paper. Insurance claims. So as we begin to make our claims in insurance, we want to go ahead and we want to make sure that we keep track of those. So when I worked in the insurance industry, and we used to go, I worked Hurricane Andrew and I worked the Northridge earthquake. One of the things that we noticed when we go to the homeowners basically would provide you with a list of every room they had, and you just look at it and say, okay, yeah, you really had this. I mean, I don't know. Because you really didn't know if they did or not. And what it basically boiled down to in Andrew and places like that was we just paid limits. Business is a little bit different. When we had to work business claims, you have specific coverage for things that are covered and things that are not covered. I've got to see that. I've got to know that you had that. Did you have coverage for this particular equipment piece? So those are the things, and you may make a claim on several different policies or several different lines within a policy. You need to make sure that you keep track of those, because while your adjuster is probably going to be, they're honest and they're going to be the ones, paying you out, it helps you to understand what it is that's out there, what's being paid, what's covered, what isn't. And this will help you keep track of doing that. Questions? Yes, go ahead.
Is it helpful to photograph?
Yes.
Yeah.
Whether it's for your home, your business, vacation rentals, whatever it is, photograph, video, everything. And give, if you video it, give play-by-play commentary. Say, I'm now in the library, and these are the books I'm going to read off. Boom, 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 and show them. Market reevaluation. So part of your disaster recovery plan is when you went into this disaster, you were leaving a specific economic market reality. You had customers in place, you had suppliers in place, the economy was humming along, and you had some predictability as to where you were going. This event changes all of that. Now what you want to do is you want to say, okay, we just had this huge event. I need to reevaluate not just my business, but the market in which I'm operating. So, Modesto and Tracy provide my inputs. They were impacted also. So, is that going to change, one, my ability to get materials, but two, does it also change the market because of impacts to my suppliers? Does it change the market because the people that bought my widgets are going to move out of the area now? They don't want to be here anymore because of an earthquake or whatever it was. I'm leaving the area. I no longer can supply to them. Maybe the lab who was buying our widgets is saying, we don't need a need for widgets right now. We're going to be in a rebuild phase for a while. So all of a sudden you need to begin to reevaluate. Say, okay, this is where I was before, market-wise. Where am I going to be going forward? I want to get back to where I was, but I need to begin to think about that, plan for it, and evaluate.
I don't know much about this, but are there systems or programs that can project ahead and that you can insert material to make those projections?
Yes, there are. A lot of, when I used to I've owned a couple of small businesses, and my degree was in economics, and so one of the things I've always used was linear regression. It's a technique that you basically can forecast out based on the information you have now. So those programs exist.
So who would be best suited to implement those programs, a CPA or something?
It would probably be the person that handles your finances.
Okay.
So at ABC Widgets, we have a finance department. We would probably ask them to begin looking at forward projections. Where are we going? What's the economy looking to do?
And if we don't have a person handling our finances, finances.
You know, then you might want to look to contractors, or it's not hard to learn. And there are software programs. So. But you do want to do that. You want to figure out where, because you don't want to come back and say, we were producing, 50,000 units, a day. Let's produce 50,000 units now, and there's no need for it anymore. So we want to make sure that we can use our resources wisely. And then at the very end, you want to take and create a training and review schedule for all of this planning. You want to basically do training on I would say, a minimum of a quarterly basis. So for your emergency action plan, do a fire drill. Let's have a fire drill every quarter. Every 3 months, we basically say fire, everybody gets out, you run through the process, document that you did it, any notes, and say, we wanted everybody out in 3 minutes, it took 4 minutes. That means next time we're going to try and get it down. So document that. Also, have a review schedule for your plan. So maybe you're going to say that every year, when we are redoing our budget, we're going to go ahead and review this document also. And the reason is because we've had new hires, we've had retirements, we've had, people out for whatever reason. But we want to go ahead and make any changes that are necessary to personnel. We want to make any changes that are necessary to suppliers, to customers, to our processes. Maybe we stop doing chrome plating because it was environmentally hazardous or whatever. We say, we're not going to do that anymore, so now we're taking that out of the plan. That's no longer one of the things that we work with. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go through a little scenario. We've got 15 minutes, and we're going to have an earthquake. And we are ABC Widget Company, and we are located right here in Livermore, California. And what's going to happen is we're going to have this earthquake, and as you watch the colors go across the screen, the darker the color, the more damage from the earthquake. So our suppliers are located, here's Livermore, we have suppliers here, and we're going to have some suppliers that are coming up out here of Santa Rosa and Napa. So that's where we get the materials from to create our widgets. And then we take all of those widgets, we box them up, and we send them over land, either into the valley by truck, or we send them to Oakland and San Francisco, where they're airshipped to the East Coast and then overseas. So we're going to have a little event, and then we're going to kind of work through everything we just talked about. What are the things that we need to start thinking about? What are the risks, and the hazards, and all of those things that we have to address with regard to this event? So remember, the darker the color, the more damage. So if you see anything that looks black or purple, this dark purpley black color, that's pretty much total devastation. That means the buildings don't survive, roads don't survive, things like that. So there's the earthquake starting. And this is a real scenario created by the USGS based on supercomputer modeling. So we just felt the shaking begin here. Boom, now we're rocking and rolling. Everybody's under the tables, everybody's under their desks. Oh, now it's really getting worse. Uh-oh. Bam! The roof just started to collapse, the building windows blew out. Oh wow, it's still going. Now it's going out into the valley. Uh-oh. It looks like the 580 is probably not going to be surviving. It looks like the 680 south isn't going to survive.
What level is this?
This right here is based on a 7.2. Santa Rosa, where we get a lot of our inputs for our widgets, doesn't look like it's... Napa looks okay, maybe a lot of shaking, maybe some damage. So that was 75 seconds. So let's kind of walk back through what we talked about earlier. So our hazard here was the earthquake. So some of the things that this earthquake is going to damage are going to be what?
Roads.
Roads.
Water systems, pipes.
Water systems,
Yeah.
gas, power maybe. Okay, so we've identified some of the things. So we're going to have no power. Is there a way that we can mitigate against that? Lessen the impact of losing power.
Lots of flashlights.
Okay, what else?
Generator.
A generator. So our business, we could have a generator. Okay. What else?
Supplies.
Hmm?
Supplies.
Supplies. So our employees are probably not going to be able to go home, right? So what happens to them? We probably need to create some emergency supply caches that contain food, water, blankets. So in the event that something like this does occur, our employees can be taken care of until they can get home.
And that could be quite a while if you're thinking about light posts and trees going across roads and so
Yeah.
forth.
That's right. So talking about light posts and trees going across roads, so we kind of talked about what's happening right here with our business, but what about the people that provide us with, and we talked about this earlier, what about the people that provide us the inputs to create our widgets? They're out of Tracy and Modesto. And the way you get here from Tracy and Modesto is through the Altamont. What do you think's happened at the Altamont?
Anything is possible. I'm sorry.
Huh?
Can't get through.
Probably not. You've got the railroad trestle there.
Which may be disrupted.
Yeah, it may come
And
down.
BART may as well.
BART may go down. There's another one right there. So people come to work on BART. Maybe people aren't going to be able to get here. So we've got a whole lot of things going on that we identified in our risk management planning. And now we're going to kind of move into that business impact. So what is our number one thing? What is it that we have to do to be in business?
Communicate.
Huh?
Well, communicate.
Well, what do we do?
Well, produce.
Produce. We build widgets, and if we're not producing widgets, we don't have a business, because that's all we do, right? So, am I going to be producing any widgets anytime soon? I got a generator, I got power, maybe, but my building's probably damaged. So until I can clear my building and make sure my building's safe, then maybe my impact right now. Now, how long can we be out of business making widgets? Because that's where we get all our money from, right? We don't do anything else. How long? 2 weeks maybe?
But just 24 hours before you can have to be back online.
Okay, so you're saying that in our scenario that we're saying we can't keep our systems down for more than 24 hours. Because once we take them down for more than 24 hours, we have to go through a whole startup process or whatever it is, and it takes forever. And so we've got to be producing widgets within 24 hours of this event, or we're out of business. Okay.
I don't know if this applies, but I'm in a nonprofit group on the board. And we sometimes do advanced planning, 2 or 3 years ahead. What would happen if a bus hit our executive director? How much money would we have to have in reserve? How would we plan in reserve with our resources? And so we have to create a piggy bank, basically, of resources that we can plan in reserve, and that becomes part of.
Excellent, and that's what we talked about in the disaster recovery planning. What type of reserves or monetary instruments do we have in place that maybe we got to be up in 24 hours? There's no way that's going to happen. But did we put money aside, or do we have a supply of widgets still in stock that we can keep pushing out to generate our income? Or do we have money set aside so that that 24-hour process isn't really going to, we're mitigating against that time, that RTO. So that's good, that's a good conversation. So we have the ability to maybe keep going then, right? We've got some money in reserve, we've got some supplies in reserve, so that 24 hours that we have to be back up and producing, okay, it's not so impactful now. So maybe we can buy maybe a couple of days, maybe a week, who knows. But as that week starts to go on and we don't see any relief in being able to get our product down the road because of whatever, now all of a sudden I'm going to start saying, okay, what do I do now? And I'm going to go back to that plan and say, okay, what were my high priorities, my low priorities? What are my things I need to work on? So maybe this is where you're saying, okay, we've already filed an insurance claim for the building. Did we have insurance for loss of, business or loss of income? So maybe this is when we say, okay, maybe it's time to start looking at that.
What about temporary loss or some loss of personnel?
That's another one right there. What do we do to mitigate against the loss of personnel that can't come in to help us produce?
They're in the ER or something.
Yeah. So those are the types of things we need to think about. So the idea behind this is to kind of think and put this in motion when you look at the damage that's occurred by this, that occurs as a result of this earthquake. It's kind of think about this scenario and then what we talked about in the planning process. So you're going to go through that, identify your risks. You're going to do that impact analysis. What is the impact of these risks? When this event occurs, how do I get out? How do we, take care of the immediate life safety needs, the immediate building needs, just getting everyone out. And then how do we reconstitute our business to get back in business? That's what I have for you today. Any questions? Yes.